The moment lasted only a few seconds. A crowded royal engagement, cameras everywhere. Senior royals lined up inside Westminster Abbey on Commonwealth Day 2020. And in the middle of all that silence and ceremony, Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, turned and locked eyes with Meghan Markle. Not a quick glance, not polite acknowledgement. A long, steady, unflinching stare that people still talk about years later. And according to body language experts, Meghan looked away first. That tiny moment said more than any interview ever could, because this was not just another awkward, royal appearance. This was the end of a relationship that had quietly collapsed behind palace walls for years. A relationship that started with genuine kindness, private support, and a direct request from Queen Elizabeth herself. And what many people don't know is that Sophie had once been chosen to help Meghan survive royal life. Not courtiers, not press officers, not protocol staff. Sophie, the woman who had already lived through public embarrassment, tabloid attacks, royal pressure, and years of brutal scrutiny before rebuilding herself into one of the most respected figures in the monarchy. Today, we are diving into the quietly devastating story of how that relationship completely fell apart. Because according to royal insiders and journalists who covered the family closely, Sophie genuinely tried to help Meghan from the beginning, and reportedly, Meghan never really let her. That is where this story becomes fascinating. Accounts from palace insiders reveal that Queen Elizabeth personally believed Meghan would struggle with the transition into royal life. Not because she disliked her, not because she doubted her intelligence, but because the monarchy is unlike anything else in the world. It has rules nobody writes down, expectations nobody explains, and pressure most people could never imagine. Every smile is analyzed. Every movement gets photographed. Every sentence becomes international news. The Queen understood that better than anyone alive. So she looked for somebody who had already survived that exact process. Somebody who entered the royal family as a complete outsider and slowly earned trust through patience and consistency. That person was Sophie. And honestly, when you look at Sophie's history, the choice makes complete sense. People forget now, because her reputation is so polished, but Sophie's early years inside the monarchy were rough, very rough. In 2001, she became trapped in a major tabloid sting operation that embarrassed the palace and nearly destroyed her standing completely. For many public figures, that kind of scandal becomes permanent. The label never leaves them. But Sophie handled it differently. She disappeared from the drama, no explosive interviews, no public bitterness, no blaming the institution. She simply adjusted, quietly. Over time, she rebuilt her image through years of low-key royal work that most people barely noticed. Charity visits, community events, causes that generated almost no headlines. And slowly, something changed. The palace began trusting her again, then respecting her, then relying on her, until eventually she became one of Queen Elizabeth's most dependable family members. That history matters because it explains why the Queen believed Sophie could guide Meghan better than anyone else. She had already survived the storm herself. But there is another detail many people overlook. Sophie did not approach Meghan coldly or formally. According to reports, she went out of her way to make Meghan comfortable from the start. She reportedly visited Meghan at home and spent hours explaining how royal life actually worked once cameras disappeared. Not the glamorous version, the real version. The exhausting schedules, the silent hierarchy, the invisible rules, everything. And according to multiple accounts, Sophie even gave Meghan her private phone number with a simple message. Call anytime. Imagine that for a second. A senior royal personally opening the door and saying, "If you feel overwhelmed, I understand this life. I can help." That was not palace protocol. That was personal. But here is where the story takes a sharp turn. Reportedly, after that meeting, communication almost completely stopped. No follow-up. Relationship. No growing friendship. No repeated conversations. Nothing. And later, When Meghan spoke publicly about feeling unsupported inside the royal family, many royal watchers immediately remembered Sophie, because there had been support, direct support. The Queen herself had arranged it. That contradiction became impossible for royal observers to ignore, especially as more stories started leaking from behind the scenes. According to insiders, Sophie kept trying even after the silence. She reportedly reached out multiple times because she genuinely believed she could help Meghan navigate the institution. But eventually, even Sophie stopped. And when Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties, one particular report shocked people watching closely. Sources claimed Sophie appeared visibly relieved. Now think about how unusual that is. This is not a royal known for drama. Sophie has spent years carefully avoiding public conflict. She is considered one of the calmest and most disciplined people in the monarchy. So if even Sophie reached the point of visible relief, people immediately started asking what life behind the scenes must have actually been like. But there is more to this story, because the collapse of their relationship did not happen loudly. It happened quietly, through body language, through distance, through tiny public moments that became impossible to ignore once people started connecting them together. And nowhere was that clearer than Commonwealth Day 2020. That event became the visual ending of everything. The cameras captured coldness that nobody could explain away anymore. Sophie stood composed and perfectly polite, but the warmth people once expected between the women had vanished completely. Royal reporters noticed it immediately, the distance, the stiffness, the carefully controlled expressions, and then came the eye contact moment people still replay online today. One long stare, one broken smile, and suddenly years of rumors did not feel like rumors anymore. Because sometimes royal drama does not arrive through screaming matches or leaked recordings. Sometimes it arrives through silence, and Sophie had become very, very silent. To understand why this relationship failed so badly, you have to understand how different Sophie and Meghan really were from the beginning. On paper, they actually had similarities. Both entered the monarchy as outsiders. Both married royal sons who were not expected to become king. Both had professional lives before royal life. Both faced enormous media pressure. But according to royal insiders, the way they responded to that pressure could not have been more different. Sophie adapted slowly. Meghan wanted immediate change. And inside an institution built almost entirely on tradition, that difference mattered more than people realized. Royal staff who worked during Sophie's early years have often described her adjustment period as difficult and sometimes painful. She reportedly made mistakes, misunderstood protocol, and struggled to find balance between private identity and public duty. But she stayed. That is the key point people around the palace always return to. She stayed through embarrassment, stayed through criticism, stayed through years of slow rebuilding. And according to journalists covering the monarchy, Queen Elizabeth respected persistence more than almost anything else. That is partly why Sophie eventually became so trusted. Meanwhile, Meghan entered royal life during a completely different media age. Social media existed. Global celebrity culture moved faster. Every moment became instant worldwide discussion. The pressure around her exploded immediately. And to be fair, some of that coverage was undeniably brutal. Even people critical of Meghan acknowledged that. But according to palace insiders, tension started building almost immediately behind closed doors because Meghan reportedly approached the institution differently than previous royal newcomers. She questioned things, challenged things, wanted explanations for rules that older royals simply accepted. Now, depending on who you ask, that was either refreshing or deeply disruptive. And this is where Sophie's role becomes incredibly important. Because Sophie represented the opposite philosophy entirely, her view seemed to be simple: learn the system first, then operate within it successfully, not fight it immediately. Accounts from journalists reveal that Sophie tried explaining how long it takes to understand royal culture properly. She reportedly told Meghan that finding her footing inside the monarchy was not quick or easy. Years, not months. That distinction matters later. Because after the Oprah interview aired, Sophie made one comment that many royal watchers considered devastatingly subtle. She reflected on her own experience and mentioned it took her 5 years to fully settle into royal life. 5 years. Meghan lasted roughly 2 as a working royal. Sophie never directly criticized her. She did not need to. The comparison spoke for itself. But long before that interview happened, warning signs were already appearing everywhere. What many people don't know is that palace dynamics are often communicated through extremely small details. Seating arrangements, event pairings, exit orders, physical positioning during ceremonies. These things are choreographed carefully, and when people break from them, insiders notice immediately. According to reports, relationships behind the scenes were already becoming strained before Harry and Meghan officially left royal duties. Different households operated separately. Communication became more formal. Trust reportedly weakened. And somewhere inside all of that, Sophie quietly stepped back. Not dramatically, not publicly. She simply stopped trying to force a connection that apparently was not developing naturally. That decision says a lot. Because by most accounts, Sophie is known as patient almost to a fault. The kind of person who keeps extending grace longer than most people would. So when she finally accepted distance, royal observers paid attention. Then came Commonwealth Day 2020. And honestly, that event changed everything. The atmosphere looked tense before anybody even spoke. Harry and Meghan were preparing to leave royal life. William and Catherine were future king and queen. The family appeared together publicly, while rumors exploded everywhere behind the scenes. Every camera angle mattered. Every interaction got analyzed. And according to people who watched carefully, Sophie's body language stood out immediately. She looked controlled, measured, finished, not emotional, not angry, just emotionally done. There is a difference. Observers described her posture as rigidly composed. She did not lean into conversation naturally. She did not appear eager to reconnect. The warmth from earlier years seemed completely absent. And then came the famous stare. It happened quickly, but online discussions about it lasted for months. Sophie looked directly at Meghan with a calm expression that somehow felt heavier than open hostility would have. Meghan reportedly broke eye contact first, and her expression shifted almost immediately afterward. Body language experts later dissected the exchange endlessly. But even without expert analysis, people could feel something was wrong. Because genuine warmth cannot be faked forever. And by that stage, whatever relationship once existed between them appeared completely exhausted.